Batch of 350 mail-in ballots were inadvertently printed and mailed.
But some Bernalillo County voters were surprised to find a second ballot in the mail.
When mail-in ballots went out, he received 5 for people who were either deceased or did not live there.
Those were some examples of the secure and definitely not overcomplicated voting system. Over the last few weeks, as primary elections were held, there were multiple states where they had issues with the mail-in ballots. The first one we're going to take a look at is in New Mexico, and they're claiming it was around 452 ballots that were incorrectly sent out. The one thing to keep in mind when it comes to the numbers is that Donald Trump and Joe Biden had multiple states that were around 10,000, 11,000 votes in difference between the two of them. Meaning a so-called error could have implications when it comes to elections, whether it's federal or on the state level, which end up being even smaller margin-wise.
The vendor now has made plans to not have that happen. We're looking at it again.
As of Monday, nearly 16,000 absentee ballots were distributed to Bernalillo County residents, according to the county clerk's office. Among that number, 452 voters received 2 ballots.
On the 8th, we mailed out ballots. On the 9th, we mailed out ballots. Our vendor accidentally on the 9th picked up some of the ballots from the 8th.
Bernalillo County Clerk Linda Stover says her team found out a day after they were delivered. She says a set number of ballots were sent out on specific days and that when counted, something didn't add up.
We noticed a difference in the numbers.
Of those 452 duplicates, 320 were for Democratic primary voters and 132 were for Republicans. The Bernalillo County Clerk's Office says they sent out this notification letter once they discovered the mistake. The letter guided voters on what to do if they received a duplicate.
Everybody that we had a contact information on, like an email or a telephone number we tried to contact, we sent everybody a letter telling them what had happened and asked them to only vote the one ballot and to destroy the other.
So what happens if a voter sends back both completed ballots? The county clerk's office says each person has a voter ID and barcode that is attached to their ballot, meaning if you voted once, it will notify the voter registry and mark that you have voted. Any duplicate ballots that are turned in are thrown away.
Then we have a similar issue coming out of Pennsylvania in Lebanon County.
In Lebanon County, the Board of Elections says a batch of 350 mail-in ballots were inadvertently printed and mailed twice. The first ballots were mailed April 13th. A second batch was sent out April 17th. The county says the duplicate ballots are identical in both serial number and barcode to the first ballot sent, so they cannot be processed and counted more than once.
While you watch these news reports, you'll notice that these really are just propaganda outlets. The government admits a mistake, whether it was intentional or a legitimate mistake, and then the media reports exactly what the government tells them to report and says, hey, they have it all handled, nothing to see here. I'm not implying that these particular events are anything more than a mistake, as I don't have any information to suggest it's anything more than that. But there is a complete lack of curiosity or a backbone when it comes to media reporting about voting integrity and mail-in ballots. There were also 2 recent election-related stories coming out of Baltimore in the last couple of weeks. I covered one of them yesterday and I'll put it at the end of this video as well. But this first one highlights what a mass mail-in ballot system can lead to when it comes to sending out ballots that are not supposed to be sent out. It's a small anecdotal example, but here's a man who was mailed 5 ballots.
I vote every year, every election.
Van Daniels takes the right to vote seriously. He says it's important to make your choice, from city council all the way to president. When mail-in ballots went out, he received 5 for people who were either deceased or did not live there.
When it first came in, the mail-in ballot, I said, okay, well, they must not have been notified.
Daniels decided the responsible thing was to send them back.
I filled out, return to sender, person is deceased, wrote it right on the envelope here, along with these others.
A few weeks later,
they were back in my mailbox.
Each envelope had the initials ANK on them. 11 News Investigates reached out to the Board of Elections, which acknowledged they are in the process of updating voter rolls, but said they never received these ballots. 11 News Investigates sent pictures of the envelopes to the U.S. Postal Service, and officials say the letters ANK typically mean addressee not known. That, despite the Board of Elections address clearly written on the corner of every envelope,
somebody's not doing something.
Daniel says he trusts the system, but wants answers on why this happened.
I'm frustrated, and I wanted to bring this to your attention.
Well, the Baltimore City Board of Elections says when they do receive returned mail-in ballots like this, they work to verify the information and update the voter rolls. In a statement, officials wrote, whenever we receive mail back from a voter with specific wording, confirmation mailers are sent out to verify the information is correct and that a signature is required from the person's representative or family member to remove them from that residence.
The week after Election Day, it's all eyes on this warehouse in West Baltimore. The City Board of Elections and volunteers continue to canvass, opening ballots, scanning them, and adding the totals to candidates' tallies. So far, 3 city council races have yet to be determined. Incumbent Eric Costello leads political newcomer Zach Blanchard by a slim margin. Paris Gray and Bilal Ali vying for Councilman Christopher Burnett's seat, open after Burnett declined to run again. And incumbent Robert Stokes trails Jermaine Jones, but the races remain undetermined as thousands of ballots continue to be counted.
And we're just, staying diligent and making sure we stay apart and engage in the process.
Jones on hand Monday, watching that count, but wants to know how a human error could have led to a mistake in Election Day results.
A lot of your trust is put into the city that when you go into this polling place and when they collect your ballot, that it's going to be collected and handled with the type of care that it deserves.
The State Board of Elections calls the city's discrepancies a human error that was later resolved. But the director of Baltimore City's elections, Armstead Jones, isn't so sure.
Can you explain what the human error was last week that we heard from the State Board of Elections?
That's a good question. I'm waiting to hear myself.
Well, you're the director.
Well, I am the director. The explanation that I've received in writing right now is not clear and not acceptable.
What do you mean not acceptable?
Well, I know what the system can do and what it's not supposed to do. So until we get clarification from the state, I'm going to leave it there.
There are reports of concerns about a flash drive with votes on it. Based on Jones's responses, it's unclear if the state believes a flash drive was read by a tabulator more than once.
So what happened with the flash drive?
Well, let me just say this. The flash drive, according to the system, can only be inserted once. And once it's put in, it cannot duplicate.
Is that what happened?
I don't know that yet. I'm a little leery about saying human error if something can't be done but once.
As it stands right now, you don't necessarily believe what the state is saying.
Well, what I'm saying right now, until I get a definitive answer and response from the vendor, I'm not real satisfied.
Just 2 years ago, election-related flash drives back in the headlines. Drives for 12 precincts in the July 2022 primary were misplaced. Given the history of questions under Jones' supervision,
do you believe that you are the right person to oversee the city elections moving forward, given the questions and concerns and issues that we've seen?
Well, let me just say this. In the years that I've been here, there have been some successful elections. Every election that is held in Baltimore or any jurisdiction has its issues. No different than Baltimore City.
Should there be this many issues with an election?
I don't know how many issues you're talking about.
Government is inefficient and should be dissolved.